Right, is everybody ready? Also my panelists? Yes? All right. So, thank you everybody, and thank you for being here again. I know it's been a long day. As you can read on the program, we're having like a panel today, which is kind of interesting, hopefully, and weird, called Doing Philosophy with Game Design, or with computer games, or with video games, depending on the tradition you are from. I was here on stage last afternoon, so my introduction will be very short. My name is Stefano. I work for the University of Malta, and over summer I work in a American academic institution. Now, today we already talked, thanks to Jere's presentation, about something that is becoming sort of pretty prominent in at least what I think is game studies or game design and design research, which is the possibility to sort of express academic concepts, philosophical concepts, or discuss culture in ways that go beyond orality and text. Right? Jere suggested the idea that we might want to take game design into account when we start doing academia, and that game design might be or might not be a possible way of expression. So why me? What have I done to deserve this position here, and what am I going to tell you is going to be, I think, evident in a brief moment. One reason why I'm presenting to you today is not only that I think this topic is particularly, I would say, recent and hot in academia, if you pass me the term, but also it's something that is very dear to my heart, as in most of my research focuses on the combination between academia and game design. Now, I often use this picture, so it's not new to many of you, to try to make a point here, which is, for me, there's not like a super great difference between the way we did philosophy in the past and the way we're doing philosophy today, perhaps, or we're trying to communicate with game design or video games. So to me, in particular, to my research, designing video games or designing virtual worlds is an opportunity to redigest and reframe old philosophical problems, or a way to come up with new questions, as also Jere pointed out, as a way to materialize thought experiments, ethical dilemmas, alternative ways of looking at the world. And I'm in good company, as in, like, perhaps not so strictly philosophically, but all the people that I invited to the panel today already engaged some form of doing culture or doing philosophy in the form of computer games, some way or another. So in a way, I understand design through the digital medium as a way to talk about philosophical issues and to perhaps raise new philosophical issues. This is not the first time I do it, because this is, I told you, an issue that is very dear to my heart. Even last year, in correspondence with the same conference, we organized a similar panel in which we try to bring independent game designers who are also scholars to relate to this mostly academic community and explain in which ways and what are the limitations of using computer games to speak about what they do on the academic side of their life. You see that some guests are back. For example, Pietro, on that side of the room, was also one of the panelists, and he was so controversial and nice that I decided to invite him once again. So what I'm doing here briefly is introducing you why this panel exists, and at the end of this brief presentation, who are the people that are going to talk to you briefly. So the panel is called Doing Philosophy with Game Design. So it engages some sort of practical ways of pursuing academic goals. And in my opinion, in the way I see it, this sort of endeavor can be related to the general frame of performativity in discourse, in cultural discourse, meaning that in my perspective, this could be a way to sort of criticize or provide an alternative to the chiefly oral and textual way of doing academia that we are classically trained to pursue. Interestingly, for example, Wittgenstein, I think I need to drink a shot, something. Okay. Wittgenstein used, for example, movie examples to make his point in several of his academic writings. And it's interesting to think about the Tractatus as not only like a textual form of representation of his thought, but actually like the editorial way by which he organized the Tractatus also had an impact, or rather a function, in the way in which he communicated thought. You know that the Tractatus works more or less like a proto-cybertext. And if you think about it, if you read it, also Derrida's Glas has this kind of editorial approach. So it goes beyond text in a way that it uses the materiality of the book to also communicate content. But those two are more like exceptions than the norm, right? In general, we understand philosophy and scholarly academia as being developed chiefly through text. Ian Bogost also was pretty critical of this position in several of his books, especially the last two. He mentioned something along the lines of, the long-standing assumption that we relate to the world only through language is particularly fetid, if still bafflingly popular, opinion. Several of the ideas that Bogost presents in, for example, doing things with video games and alien phenomenology are based on the work of David Baird, who introduces the idea of building, so of practically doing crafting, as a way of delivering and developing academic material. So he says that it offers us an opportunity, the idea of building and practically doing, to correct the discursive and linguistic bias of the humanities. So according from this perspective, and it's a perspective that I at least embrace, we should be open to communicating scholarship through artifacts, experiences, and activities, and not uniquely through text. So I think that we can, to a certain degree, all agree on this point. This is pursued in a very similar fashion in several other aspects of design. For example, the work of Dunner and Raby or the work of Matt Ratto already use, in a way, making, doing, crafting, practically and bodily engage with the subject matter in a way of, as a way of producing culture, as a way to engage academia and culture by and large. Even the growing academic sector of design research, of which I think Ida is a representative here, she's doing a PhD precisely using this methodology, is, in my opinion, a symptom of the same change, of the same shift. So the idea that culture and research can be pursued in other ways than just text. For example, in design research, you can use different stages of design to perform different kind of reflections and hypotheses, starting from the concept to the prototype to annotated portfolios and so on and so forth. So my point here is that maybe we can use video games as viable mediators of philosophical thought. If not philosophical, I suppose that not all the members of the panels here will be strictly philosophical, at least cultural content, on cultural reflection, cultural criticism. I actually wrote a book about this whole topic, and so once again, this topic is very clear to my, dear to my heart. And this is what I was talking about yesterday before. This is part of the dissertation redigested with video games inside. So if you're interested in this topic, talk to me. I can try to get you a copy. Yes. So I don't only write about these things. Being a game designer, I try to sort of do philosophy with game design myself. This is a part of a paper I presented at this same conference, 2010, when I presented a video game that was sort of a response and a criticism to Thomas Nagel's idea of what it is like to be a bat, right? And so we made a game which gives the player bat senses and so on and so forth. It looks sort of like that. It's bizarre. We gave echolocation to the player that gave rise to a bunch of problems. But this is not the place to discuss that. One of my last video games was sort of a playful redigestion of David Hume's notion of complex ideas. And the game that I personally am going to discuss in my little talk is sort of a game that brings to the fore George Berkeley's subjective idealism as a playable artifact. I'm not just standing here alone. I told you I introduced partly some of my panelists, but I would like to go quickly through each and every one of them in terms of their portfolio, their sort of academic inclinations, and so on and so forth. What's going to happen after my presentation is that each and every one of us are taking sort of 5 to 6 minutes to present one specific design idea that we use to convey a particular philosophical or cultural message. After that, we will hopefully all sit in front of here, and you can sort of throw rotten tomatoes at us and your questions and criticism, because I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a lively discussion, meaning that it's expectable that you will disagree to some of our points here, or all of them. So I'm really, really eager to see what goes on. I will also function as a host once we're finished, so I will go around and collect questions and so on. So who is in the panel after me? You will have Anna Wirman, who also talked yesterday, and she's engaged in a number of different research topics, including gender studies and animal-computer interaction. She's based in Hong Kong, and he's heavily involved with the Chinese DIGRA as well, correct? Yes. We have Pietro, also from Italy. He is one of the two pillars of a very well-known independent game studio called Santa Ragione. And their work relies on exploration and unusual experiences, and he's always a pleasure to talk to, and I hope that will be the case today. Yes. Sonia, I met Sonia in Lüneburg during the last DIGRA, and Sonia was part of the gamification lab that was actually running in Lüneburg in the past, I think, 3 years. Is that correct? 3 years? 2 years? Altogether?
I was there 2 years, but the lab existed for 3.
Okay. So, and Sonia now moved to Berlin, and she keeps researching in the field of gamification, or rather ludification of culture. Then we have Martin Pickelmeier. He used to be like a quite famous game designer, independent scene in Europe with the broken rules thing. Is something wrong? Did I spell it wrong?
No, just he used to be.
Well, he used to be a game designer, and now like you're mostly an academic. Okay, he used to be a human being, now he's something else, and he also works at ITU Copenhagen teaching game design. And last but not least, Ida Toft. She, I don't know if you used to be part of the Copenhagen Game Collective or are still part of it, so instead of making another faux pas, I would say she's somehow involved with the Copenhagen Game Collective, and she's currently pursuing a PhD at Concordia University in Canada in the field of design research. Right. So since I'm already on stage, I'm going to start with my 6-minute presentation about something playful that I sort of designed 2 years ago, and I will discuss today with you. Let's get started. So this little thing that I'm presenting today is called Necessary Evil, and it's a critical game, right? I'm showing this screenshot here to sort of talk to Jere in particular, because in presenting this game to the DIGRA 2013, which is the original reason why the game was made, we actually presented this idea not only in the form of a video game as a self-standing artifact, but correlated to a number of other forms of media that might actually elucidate the meaning of that experience. We have a Gamasutra article, a YouTube video, a downloadable game, and so on and so forth. You can play the game freely there. Now, let me see if I can run the video now. Okay, it looks like I can. So why is this game philosophical? The main reason, okay, I need to take the volume down. Let's hope I can do this, yes. The main reason this game was made is to sort of criticize the way in which we understand video game worlds. And I'm making one single point here. The way in which we understand digital worlds is a subjective, idealistic one. What do I mean by that? We construct worlds that exist only when they're perceived by players, right? When parts of the games are not like immediately perceived by the players, or there's no player to look at it, or when the view of something is hidden from sight, that part of the game world does not like necessarily exist. So how am I making this point? So what I decided to do is create a single room and give the player agency over one little minion, right? You're probably familiar with this kind of dungeon minions. So what I'm trying to do is prove a point in the opposite. So we're not actually designing worlds that are holistic. We're designing worlds that revolve around the specific subjectivity that pursues it, experiences it, acts in it. So what if I give you agency over one of these minions for whom the world is not designed for? So you put in a single room and there's nothing for you to do. We could talk about how you interact with the different objects, right? And well, the point here is that there's not much point in discussing the fact that all of them essentially sort of respond but serves no purpose. The game sort of continues in this kind of uselessness until a certain point when the player, or a simulacrum of the player, comes into play.
Ow. Where am I? Tell me, horned minion of evil, or I'll take your petty life. Huh? Spare your hums, pitiful abomination, and prepare to die. Evil shall never prevail.
So now that the player sort of won, okay, let's see.
Victory is mine. That pitiful monster had it coming.
So in this case, you see that things start to respond for these other characters. Chests contain things. If he approaches the library that was just shaking, he can read a book, and in the book we also wrote about the thesis of this game, right? You can read that video games are idealism as working products and so on and so forth. And the main character is actually allowed to leave the room and continue the experience because he's not functionally related to the room by itself. Are we going on? No, okay. After that, after the player has left the room, I cut out that part, the room is disassembled and taken apart and taken away from the computer memory because it's no longer necessary for the experience of that single sort of player that used to play this game, or that rather appeared in our game session. I want to focus on the idea of battle, right? Because it seems to me that the battle in this first version of the game just plays a role in which, like, it seems that the monster is always supposed to lose the game, right? You're functional to somebody else's experience, and you seem to have no chance against the player that comes in and slays you. However, if the player is skilled enough, he can actually defeat the prince, and I'll show you all the
Pitiful abomination, and prepare to die. Evil shall never prevail.
So this is me trying to actually beat the AI, which is sort of possible. So at this point it's game over because the player was killed and the game gets de-rezzed anyway. So the point here, rather than discussing all the individual elements of the game, I'm making a point about how the battle, regardless of how good you are, if we see the world from a point of view that is non-privileged in game design, meaning the ones of an entity which is not the player, makes no sense. You cannot win. You're going to be de-rezzed and you're going to be limited to a very minimal amount of agency, right? And I try to make this point by precisely giving the opposite than usual behavior in video games to the player for them to experience firsthand, right? So I'm making sort of a self-reflexive claim, but it's also a claim that was heavily inspired by that vision of the world. The idea that, well, we design idealistic worlds. And there's also an article about it if you feel like reading it. And to me, this is sort of an example of how you can sort of translate part of a philosophical, I would say, concept or argument into a playable format. Right. And this was my brief part of the presentation, and I invite Anna to come here and take the mic.